Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
The jump is like something, it's not like completely obsolete, but because of course it's the same platform, and I think they did a really good job of like translating the tools from MacBook to iPad. After those 20 minutes of that learning curve, it just got like it felt normal.
Welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. As many of you know, Apple recently announced the huge news that both Final Cut Pro and Logic Pro are coming to the iPad. And if you're listening to this on episode release day, May 23rd, 2023, then both of those apps are now out and available for download as either a $5 monthly subscription or $50 a year. I'll be doing another episode in the future all about Logic Pro on the iPad, as this episode is all about Final Cut Pro. I'm pleased to share that in this episode that we are joined by Ash from the popular TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram channels Ash Has a Camera. Ash was one of the few people that got to use Final Cut Pro on the iPad before it was officially announced to the world by Apple, and she was featured in the official introduction video of Final Cut Pro for iPad that you'll find on Apple's website and YouTube channel. As a reminder, you can support the podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. My great thanks to everyone that supports the podcast. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. You can also leave a review in Apple Podcasts, which helps others discover the show. With that, here's my interview with Ash. Enjoy.
Welcome to the podcast, Ash.
Hi, yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to have you on because I was watching the Final Cut announcement video that Apple released, and there you are in it. So first off, congrats in being featured by Apple and being one of the first in the world to check out this new version of Final Cut for iPad.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was super exciting.
So before we dive into all the big news of Final Cut coming to iPad, I first want to just chat a bit about your work, how long you've been creating videos, what inspired you to start. I guess is a good place to begin with this.
Yeah, so I got my start in summer of 2020. I had just graduated high school then, so I'm rounding out around 3 years, which is crazy to think about.
Yeah.
But back then, I had taken a couple videography classes in high school, so going into college, I knew I wanted to pursue the entertainment industry, specifically like film and videography. Mm-hmm. So that's what I started exploring. And since it was like peak quarantine season, my friends and I just kind of had to stay home all day. We couldn't really like hang out or travel or do any of that fun stuff. Right. So I had a camera at home and I busted it out and I just started filming whatever I could just from practice. And I just started posting it on TikTok, was my first platform. And as I kept getting better and I kept exploring more and more projects, my work started getting more traction. And that's when I started, instead of just doing like painting videos with editing flares and like cool editing tricks, I started actually delving into product videography as a whole. Mm-hmm. And that's how I got it started in the commercial space.
That's really cool. And for commercial space, have you been like contracted by any companies yet to do commercials officially?
I've been reached out to pretty consistently throughout the years. And I think it's a very good opportunity because, of course, my content is so malleable to each brand and what they're looking for basically in content that's marketable organically on basically every platform.
That's super cool. And yeah, you mentioned at the beginning you did more painting videos, and the painting itself is very good. Is that a background that you explored in high school as well?
Yeah, so when I first started, I think I just kind of blended all of my old hobbies that I'd kind of forgotten about back in high school with like studying for the ACTs and APs or whatever. Once I had the time back for myself, I kind of explored more hobbies that I could kind of just like put on the back burner for the past couple of years. Painting was one of them. I think videography, especially for fun, was another, since in high school I was creating a lot of like short films for my portfolio, and I kind of forgot about just like fun little tricks that I could make literally at home.
I noticed within TikTok, you'll create videos sometimes as a response to an audience member wanting that. Is that part of the great thing about TikTok as a platform, or that interaction with the audience?
Yeah, so a lot of the times what I'll do is I'll incorporate like a commented by a user on another one of my videos just to tie it all in.
Yeah.
And it just kind of gives this aspect of community where I'm interacting with my audience members and saying, hey, that's a good idea. I'll put a spin on that and then incorporate it into my next video.
Yeah. And for the food videos, I guess how much into like baking and cooking and like food stuff are you into? With some of those, did you have to I remember on the YouTube, the long form one, you're kind of explaining how you make your videos and your baking and stuff. How much in the baking and that kind of background are you into?
I actually have very little experience in cooking and baking.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because that's like what I specialize in now. I think the reason why I started leaning more into food videography was just because food is such a universal concept. Everyone has their favorites. Everyone can look at the screen and be like, okay, that looks really good. And so it's such an appealing concept to such a mass audience that I was like, that's a really good niche to tap into. And now I've taught myself like a lot of recipes. Whenever I like make something new for a video, I also teach myself the recipe because I have to assemble it. So now my repertoire has definitely grown.
Yeah. And it's always amazing seeing food commercials, how fast food, see in the commercial, it looks just, amazing. And then you get at the restaurants like, that's not exactly what it's like.
It's all in the marketing.
All of the marketing, yeah. And how have you kind of developed that technique of like showing off food in a fun way? The sprinkles falling down top and capturing all these different elements and kind of piecing it together in a cohesive way.
Yeah, with food, I would say it's all very macro. It's very centered around the details because when you eat food, you're very incorporated in your senses. You like taste it, you feel it. So I really have to make sure to get the textures. In post, I have to use speed ramps and really zoom in onto what I need. And sometimes I'll sharpen things just to really emphasize the textures. So appealing to the five senses, I think, is a very strong suit in food because then the audience can almost taste it through the screen, which is why I think those videos are so appealing too.
Right. And with TikTok, do you have to design videos with the presumption that they can be played without sound? How much does your work creating it with both the idea that they might have their speakers on or off when you're watching it?
Yeah, I think TikTok as a platform is so reliant on sound that I don't think I've ever encountered anyone with their sound off.
Yeah.
Just because not only is TikTok an endless flood of videos.
Yeah.
It has a huge library of audios as well, which honestly are the backbone of probably every trend on the platform.
Okay.
So I make sure to, especially in post, I sync up every single visual to the music.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's the backbone of everything. I choose the music first and then the trend, and then that's when I shot list after that.
Gotcha. My apologies. I do not watch that much TikTok, so I wasn't sure. I'm used to, I guess some platforms. Are there other platforms that it's kind of like video in the kind of the silent mode they work within?
I think the closest thing that comes to mind is Reels, although audios are also very, very important.
Yeah.
But I'm on the side of Reels where it's a lot of cinematography and people just vlogging their lives, but in a very, artsy, creative way.
Yeah.
And in those videos, it very much relies on the visuals being gorgeous and very appealing. But then the audio also adds to that.
Yeah.
So.
And for music, are you able to? You're not able to pick from any song, or do you have a copyright-free selection? I'm not sure. I know I've heard with certain length, if you're 10 depending on the length, short stuff you'd be able to get away with, or what's that approach like for?
Music has always been a very difficult thing to navigate. On YouTube, there are certain songs where you can clip less than 30 seconds, I think, and then share the revenue with the original copyright owner.
Yeah.
But then especially when it comes to doing brand work, say with companies, there's a very strict copyright free rule where I won't be able to use any music that I don't explicitly own.
Okay.
So in those situations, I go to like audio libraries where I have a subscription and a license to use music like that. And then that's how that basically works out.
Yeah. What other platforms have you expanded to? I know you have a YouTube platform with some longer form stuff, which is cool as well. Is Instagram a place? What other kind of platforms have you explored?
Yeah, my 3 central platforms are TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. And I've tried Pinterest, I've tried like Facebook and Snapchat, but I think those 3 are my biggest pillars.
Yeah. So I love in the videos how the TikTok videos and YouTube whatnot, you kind of show a little bit of the behind the scenes and then the final results, and all in one just quick video. And I think that's a pretty cool idea of just showing, how you get your work done a little bit as well. Is that a common thing in TikTok, seeing both angles of that in such a short time, or?
For me, the reason why I do it is because on TikTok, the algorithm very much values people engaging with the content. Mm-hmm. And so in my stuff, I make sure to really like tell a story throughout every single video that I post.
Yeah.
And I found that a lot of people, like you would think that the main selling point is like the final commercial with the really pretty shots shot on my like professional camera. It's actually the behind the scenes part, like the storytelling part that people really gravitate towards because they want to see how I create my videos, especially in like just like a tiny apartment at my college.
Yeah.
So that's really what like grabs the audience, I think. And so both of those parts are equally important. Mm-hmm. And so I make sure to put equal amounts of attention and thought into both.
Yeah. And something that was just a dumb moment was when I saw like a MacBook Pro behind one of your shots as like a backdrop, which is like, oh, that makes total sense. Disney does this at a much larger scale for like Star Wars. But yeah, where does kind of ideas like that come from, using things in your environment to turn them into kind of video tools?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of just like staring around my apartment and seeing what I have. I've used like clothing, like thread to suspend things from my lights before and like turn them and stuff. But I do attribute a lot of like the techniques that I've learned to also other creators that I've seen online. I've seen people use the backdrop trick before, and I thought it was like super clever. And of course, it saves so much space and money too with buying so many colored backdrops. So I definitely do take a lot of inspiration from like also the media that I consume online.
Yeah. Is stop motion animation something you play around with much for your videos? I'm not sure if that's like a technique.
I've done like 1 or 2 shots. I definitely stop motion is not like my strong suit in any way, shape, or form, but I have dabbled in it.
Okay. Yeah, it's a very time consuming thing I've played around with in the past, making, your action figures come to life. It's a fun thing, but it's not time consuming for sure. Does Final Cut provide a way to do that directly, or when you do use that kind of technique, do you have to resort to other tools?
The times that I have done it, I've personally used Final Cut, where I just take like a series of photos and then I make them all 1 frame long and then I string them all together.
Yeah.
But of course, like I've only dabbled in it once or twice, so there might be like a more professional way to do it that I'm not sure of, but it's definitely possible in Final Cut.
Yeah. So as you're honing your skills doing commercials and whatnot, do you see yourself in like 10 years, whatever, working for any of these big companies, or do you like being able to just bounce around company to company, creating commercials for them and kind of getting to explore different products in that way?
Yeah, I absolutely love freelancing because it's there's so many opportunities out there for you. Of course, it is a little like rocky. You're not entirely sure in terms of like stability, but I love being able to work with like such different clients from month to month. So in 10 years, I think I'd definitely want to like make my own production company and like make these projects on a much bigger scale with a lot of collaboration and, you know, bouncing ideas off of teammates and stuff. But definitely want to explore different kinds of products, different projects, potentially even at the same time, and really like do as much as I can.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so as you've started, it's only been 3 years. As you've had your techniques and skills develop over those 3 years, what are some of the things you're most proud of as far as, oh, I can now do this, and that would have been a huge challenge in the beginning of all this?
To be honest, I think everything.
Yeah.
Like if I 3 years ago saw like the videos that I've been making now, I don't think I'd really believe, or I just think it would be really cool just because like, especially when people just start out with an editing platform, you know, the things that they're doing and they're learning is just like cutting clips at certain points and then syncing it with music. But honestly, like for me, I think that even the most like advanced like seeming editing tricks that I do, it's just built up from the basics where like the speed ramps are just that, they're speed ramps, and the animations, it's just like transforming a single photo or like video and then like speed ramping it a little bit and spicing it up, and then that's just like built up from the basic techniques. So I think like coming this far, I think it's more important to really like get a hold of the basics and see like what you can do with it, rather than, oh, it's like a new tool that like I haven't learned yet or stuff like that, especially when it comes to Final Cut.
Yeah. And is that the tool you started with when you 3 years ago? Was it Final Cut from day one? You've kind of been learning more and more tricks within that app?
Yeah, I think day one was iMovie, and then after I think half a year, I kind of just graduated to Final Cut.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then gear-wise, how has that kind of evolved? Like camera-wise, different cameras from when you started, you know, different computers, all that.
Yeah, so I started with the Panasonic Lumix G7, I want to say, starter camera, and it was my first ever camera, and I was kind of just figuring out, like I didn't understand the concept of aperture or ISO or shutter speed at all. I just kind of like point and shot. And then once I started to like get a grasp of all those settings, I got the Canon 90D in a bundle from like Costco.
Yeah.
And I used that for a pretty long time. And that's when I kind of started doing my product videography stuff. So it was kind of like a mid-tier camera, but a lot was definitely possible with it. And then now I use the Sony a7S III, and I absolutely love it. It's kind of the best thing ever.
Nice. Yeah. I have a Micro Four Thirds Sony, and I do love that camera. It gets some great shots. Different lens system, right? With the moving from Canon to Sony.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
That was like the number one thing that I was most concerned about, because I had a couple starter lenses from Canon already, so I already had more options. But I do think the switch to the Sony a7S III was worth it. Yeah.
Did you do any multicam stuff, or do you just shoot with the one camera primarily?
Yeah, I shoot with the one camera.
Okay.
As of right now, yeah.
Gotcha. And then you'll sometimes have, you know, your iPhone to shoot you shooting with the real camera. Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Yep. And then you're just using a MacBook Pro primarily for kind of doing all the edits?
Yeah, I've recently made the upgrade from the 2016 MacBook Pro to the M2 chip. And the difference is like night to day.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. And then iPad wise, is that a tool in your arsenal, or has it been a tool? And, you know, did you have one prior to this announcement of Final Cut coming to iPad?
I actually don't have an iPad, and I still don't have an iPad. Way back in the day, I have used it before when I had my little like digital drawing phase. Yeah. And I will say, like with the Apple Pencil and everything, it's just very, very easy. And I loved it a lot. And then slowly as I got to college, I kind of like dropped off that and focused a lot more on like videography editing. Right. So that's kind of my focus for now.
Okay. Gotcha. Cool. So, yeah, let's jump into Final Cut coming to iPad. So, what was your initial reaction about this? coming to iPad, and also I guess hearing directly from Apple before the rest of the world knew must have been a cool kind of moment for you.
Yeah, I mean, I had no idea what to expect going into that meeting, but when they unveiled it, it was definitely like a very, very cool moment where like in my mind I was already imagining like all the new possibilities or everything that I could do with it.
Yeah.
So it was a very cool announcement to be there for.
Yeah. How much time did Apple kind of let you spend to kind of get a sense of Final Cut on iPad to see, how this would work into your own kind of workflows for different videos you'd like to shoot one day?
Yeah, so they gave me a pretty comprehensive presentation of basically everything that was coming with the iPad.
Yeah.
The Final Cut. But before we actually got to shooting, I actually didn't really get to sit with the iPad for more than like 2 hours. I just met them and like I ran through like the absolute basics and I was like, yeah, this is really cool. But I think, after like the first, I want to say like 20 minutes, obviously with the UI and like having different tools at your arsenal, it's like the jump is like something. It's not like completely obsolete. But because of course it's the same platform and I think they did a really good job of like translating the tools from MacBook to iPad. After those 20 minutes of that learning curve, it just got like it felt normal.
Yeah, so there wasn't a big learning curve to like, oh, I know how to do this here. How do I do it over here? It kind of like, yeah, okay.
It was more of like a thing of like going through the menus and relearning where everything was. But then the basics and the techniques all like translated really well.
Nice. And did you have a setup with the Magic Keyboard as well, or was it primarily just in the tablet mode where you're using the touch interface?
Yeah, I had the tablet and then an Apple Pencil.
Mm-hmm. Tablet, Apple Pencil, cool. And like the jog wheel and kind of the touch accommodations, that all felt, it wasn't a big learning curve, that felt kind of natural and good to you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found myself like reaching for it pretty immediately after I learned about it. So it was very useful.
Very cool. And can you explain a bit more about the jog wheel and kind of how it functions a bit? I understood a little bit about you're able to like kind of do kind of frame by frame interactions, or kind of what's the jog wheel all about?
Yeah, I think it was just like a tool made to enhance basically the process of like skimming through clips. Just because like if you just have your finger on the screen, it's a little clunky. It can like get in the way and you can't really see what you're doing. So the jog wheel, it can get very, very precise.
Yeah.
And from what I remember, it also snaps into place too. So like it's very like intuitive to see, like you can skim very finely through your clips, just to like see all the details. And then if you need to, you can also snap to the beginning or the end of clips as well.
Nice. And then does it how do you kind of initiate the jog wheel? Does it show up anywhere that you like tap and hold, or is there a certain button that kind of brings it up?
I don't want to say exactly what, because I don't like super duper remember.
Okay.
But I think it is a button that comes up, and then it lives in like the bottom right corner of the screen, where you can just like move up and down and it'll work. Yeah,
because I'm trying to just visualize like interacting with Final Cut. You don't want it accidentally coming up.
Right.
A place for that. So your workflow working with Final Cut on the Mac, does everything translate over from what you've seen to the iPad version? Like, if you wanted to, could you just grab an iPad Pro and do your videos from there, or were there missing components from what you've used?
To be honest, I think the vast majority of everything translated over pretty well, especially since I'm getting more into like long form YouTube videos with like vlogs and stuff. So those like macro projects that are potentially like more long form, I think that really excels with the iPad. Like if I, for example, was on a trip to somewhere on a plane or like in an Uber even, I would definitely like bring those projects to the iPad Pro and just work on it on the go. Just because like those clips are longer, it's less like detailed and fine, and like the titles and the generators and the effects all like have translated. So I think it would be pretty like intuitive and easy to do that. But for my current like tabletop videos, I think the stuff that I make is very niche in the fact that like they are like 20 seconds absolute maximum, and I'm working like frame by frame, and it's like so precise. And I do a lot of like post-production processing where I'm like transforming the actual clip and like rotating it and then keyframing and all of that. Which then makes it a little harder, especially with like the touch screen and just how that works. I do prefer like having a keyboard and a mouse. And I will say like the number one thing that I think I've missed the most is speed ramping. You are able to like splice the clip into 2 separate clips and like make one like say 50% and then the other keep it at 100%, but there is no like gradual shift between those. As opposed to on Final Cut for the MacBook, you can just press Shift B and it just like splits it just like that. And that's a feature that I use for probably every single clip. And I would very much miss that. On the iPad Pro.
So hopefully they get to adding that one day because it sounds like it is subscription based pricing, so hopefully they have incentive to continue to try to get it up to feature parity with the Mac, because right now it's a one-way trip. You can start on iPad and go to Mac. I'd imagine their end goal is to try to add more and more of these features so it could be a round trip process.
Right.
And then I'd also be curious, in the future, trying this out with the trackpad and keyboard and seeing how much that makes it more conducive to those kind of...
Exactly, yeah.
Because that is something that can work pretty nicely with that. So the Apple Pencil you mentioned you did have, and we're using an M2 iPad Pro, I believe. So how is that experience like? There's hovering over clips to kind of preview and things like that.
Yeah, I think in terms of like using Final Cut on the iPad, it is a very like good tool to have because it adds so much more precision also. And it's so intuitive because, again, like that skimming feature, you can just hover the pencil over the iPad and you will be able to like just have an overview of the clips. And so that's like a feature that I really loved using. Another that they showed that I was very impressed by was you could just draw directly on the screen and then it will auto animate whatever you draw or write. So I thought that was very cool as well.
That's pretty... And with the drawing, so does it capture kind of how fast you're drawing, kind of let you play around without that animation? Or kind of... Can you dive into like what's the end result asset? It gives you like an extra track with like that drawing that you can manipulate, or...
Yeah, so it's an extra track and then it auto animates where you can change like the speed at which it finishes, or you can make it like draw out a little bit more or like finish immediately. And it's also transparent, so you can overlay it between things, over things. Yeah, so it's a very cool thing, and I was very impressed by it because like on the Mac, of course, you can't do that at all. You would have to do it on an iPad and then import it in.
Right.
So that's a feature that really stood out to me, where it would be a very big advantage to have an iPad and do that, as opposed to in the MacBook.
Yeah. And do you know, is it pressure sensitive, like fountain pen mimicking, where you could have a thin to thick line kind of with pressure?
Yeah.
It is, okay. And then you get to pick, I imagine all the ink colors, whatever you're working with. Yeah. And it is that one style, or... there's no like pencil version of it where it like looks different as far as like the ink that's laying down?
I think there are different
Okay.
like tools that you can pick from.
Okay. Very cool. Yeah, that thing looked very neat. And I could see even like creating educational materials, like that being an interesting avenue for editing, where you're just circling stuff and drawing on stuff. That could be interesting from that angle too.
Exactly. Yeah.
Multicam is in here. It's not something that you use in your own videos, Is this something that you played around with just to see what it's like, or?
Yeah, it's a tool that like really streamlines the process of like creating, I think, especially vlogs or like long form content.
Yeah.
Where if you have a bunch of different shots, you can rotate between them on the beat to the music, which then of course like cuts down a ton of time of just like splicing things and like copy and pasting different clips and then like narrowing them down. Of course, for my videos, since I have a very specific shot list for each one, I wouldn't necessarily use that because I don't really go back and forth between clips.
Yeah.
But I will say for, say, like interviews or like having B-roll and then like talking heads, it would be so easy just to like have a layout of just a bunch of clips and then like just tap through each one instead of needing to manually do it. So I definitely see a lot of potential for that feature too.
Yeah, and the audio sync seems to work just as well as it would on the Mac. Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you get 4 tracks plus an audio track, or is it 4 in total? Do you recall?
I don't think so.
Gotcha. Okay. And then let's see. Machine learning is something they're adding to the iPad version, which I think all of this stuff is not on the Mac version yet. I'd imagine this is a preview as to what's coming next for the Mac version. So they call these fast cut automations. And the first is a scene removal mask, which isolates the subject without the need of a green screen. This seems like something right up your alley as you kind of isolate, sprinkles falling from the sky or whatnot. How did this kind of tool work for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's an amazing tool just because it has so many applications. I was very excited about it. I think for the scene removal tool, it would work the best with, again, like vlogs and like adding spice to your videos or like promotional videos and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Because they showed like a couple clips of like someone walking across the screen and you could automatically like key out the person without needing to draw a single mask. And that was just very cool. For my product videos, it's, again, because it's so precise and detail oriented that like a single blip in like or error in the removal will completely just like not be able to, I wouldn't be able to use it. And as of right now, there is not that much customization that goes into it where once you drag it on, you can't really change like the feathering of it or like how it looks and stuff like that, which I assume it's something that they're going to like polish later on. But like for overarching shots that are like more, like a very distinct subject and like wide angle and has like a background, I think it works very, very well for that.
Yeah.
But in terms of like getting to like the macro and like the details, they would have to polish it a little bit more.
Yeah, I know with photo editing, and I'll use some of the machine learning, like remove the background, and it does a good first pass a lot of times, but at least with photo editing, you can then go in and like make sure that
clean it up a bit.
Yeah, clean up a bit. So
yeah,
hopefully they add things like that to do cleanup work after the first pass.
Yeah, but I think it's an amazing idea that they're implementing, and I mean, I would love to see it on the MacBook version as well.
Yeah.
Because it like would be so helpful in so many situations. So.
Yeah, and I don't know if it would be even for prototyping stages a cool tool to just like test some things out.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right. And then the other big one is an auto crop, which intelligently adjusts footage for different aspect ratios. Any general thoughts regarding this?
I actually didn't delve into that much in my testing. Yeah,
because I'd imagine like if you're shooting for vertical, you have your camera set up for vertical. So this is, I'm guessing just probably that it's, I don't know, allowing people to morph in the different kind of final outputs you can have. Right?
Yeah, I'd assume it's very useful for like repurposing content.
Yeah.
Since sometimes like, especially clients, sometimes they need horizontal assets versus vertical. So being able to do that automatically would be just like very useful.
Yeah.
And it would like be able to use the same content for like a bunch of different applications.
Yeah, which seems neat. And then the final one is voice isolation, which is something Apple's been putting everywhere. It's kind of it's an audio plugin on just iOS apps. Like my podcast editor for iPad this voice isolation thing is available to that app because it's like system level and it's now in Final Cut, which is cool. Is this something you would use for your kind of sound mastering process, or do you have a good workflow in place already?
I think me personally, I do already have a pretty good workflow for it. Especially since like a lot of my content, especially short form, I don't include voiceover, or like sometimes I do, but then I'll talk right into my iPhone or like record the audio separately. And then of course like put it back in. But I do see also like a lot of application for it because voiceovers are so prominent. Or even if like you're outside and like there is background noise, but then you're also like trying to talk. I think having that feature and then just being able to isolate your voice and like put it back in would be like very helpful, especially for longer form content.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, when you're in unpredictable environments, it's a nice thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
So next up, is the dynamic titles, effects, music, and backgrounds. You delve into a little bit of this for your own videos, and imagine how easy were these to work with? Did it feel kind of right at home, manipulating titles and backgrounds and all that?
Yeah, I mean, other than like of course, like the learning curve of going from like different UI designs, I will say like the titles, like putting in titles and then animating them translates pretty well. Yeah. Where it's like a similar process where you keyframe it, you can like translate or transform each title and then like have them move across the screen or whatever you need to do. Mm-hmm. I don't recall if every single effect and title has made it over from MacBook to iPad. But since for me personally, usually if I'm like working with titles for motion graphics, I use just like the most basic title and then change the font and the size and whatever. So that's all made it over.
Nice. Yeah. And is the music helpful in Final Cut? Do you ever delve into there as a source for any of your content?
I've actually not. It's something that I do want to explore. And when I was working with Apple to test out the program for the first time, I actually did use some of the tracks and they were like very good.
Good. Yeah. And then I'm curious about color grading. This is something important for a lot of videographers, I'd imagine. How did you get to play around with like importing LUTs or video scopes to kind of get the look you're after? I'm not sure. Is this something you currently do with your own videos?
I did not get the chance to import LUTs, I don't think, but they do have vector scopes and video like waveforms that you can pull up to work with as you're also like going through the video. And from what I remember, like the setup was very intuitive and it made a lot of sense where you would be able to like see the two side by side. You could like resize the vector scope window. You could either like, you can have it like pop up and then like move it to wherever you wanted. So that was very cool to see. Nice.
Yeah. And then motion templates is a big unknown. Do you know, is that something you're able to import and play around with in Final Cut? I'm not sure if you use motion in your own day-to-day with the work you do.
I have it downloaded, but I've never actually explored it. So that's on my to-do list. And if it does support motion like crossover, that'd be also really cool. But I can't say for sure.
Gotcha. Yeah, when I used to do a lot more on the Mac, and when I did, I do own motion, and I opened it the couple times, and it was a lot scarier than Final Cut, so I kind of stayed within Final Cut mostly.
Yeah, I've seen the menus, and it's a lot to learn, it seems like. So one day I'll sit down and get to it.
Yeah. So something that the iPad has, which the Mac doesn't really have that good of, is a camera. And Final Cut on the iPad Pro has a way to capture video directly within the app, so you don't have to offload stuff into it. You can just kind of work on the iPad, all kind of closed ecosystem kind of thing. And they've introduced these new capturing kind of presets for different lighting scenarios. If you're kind of in bad fluorescent lighting, they have a setting for that. Is that something you played around with for capturing directly within Final Cut?
I didn't get the chance to play around with that specifically, but I have been able to like use the camera on the iPad that they gave me and then like import that footage into Final Cut. which was very easy. I also got the chance to like, since I capture everything onto my SD card on my camera, and then I brought an SD dongle that converts to USB-C. Literally all I needed to do was plug that into like the charging port that was also USB-C, and then everything imported very, very easily, where you just like, a menu comes up, you tap everything, click import, and then they're all just in there, which is very surprisingly easy. I thought there was going to be like more steps to it, but it took like 30 seconds.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, I know there are some apps on iPad that you can like even edit directly off external, SSDs and hard drives and stuff. So I'm curious how well Final Cut plays into all that. That's something obviously we haven't had time to test.
Yeah. I mean, the idea of that is really cool, where you can just like plug in an external hard drive and like edit off of it and then like take it back out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And then keyframing is there for both audio and video. And it's keyframing what you do in the initial process of like syncing up the big hits in the music track to have a splash to?
I think it's like whenever I need to mark a certain audio, like say a beat drop or like the beat of a music, I press the key M.
Yeah.
Which is different from keyframing.
Okay.
But it's like just like putting like a little marker or like a flag on each track.
Gotcha.
Yeah. And I don't recall if that was in the iPad specifically, but yeah.
I'd imagine it's in there. Probably it'd be helpful to have a keyboard for that one though.
Yeah, for sure.
For the keyframing stuff, what are you able to do with this for audio and video here on iPad?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it lives in a separate menu basically. So there's keyframing and then there's like the transform tools. So when you're keyframing, I think the skills translate very well, where you can just like say move a video from one end of the screen to the other end. And then you can also like change the spot of the keyframes to make the motion faster, slower. So there's a lot of customization. And as someone who like was working off of the MacBook Pro, I think like figuring all of that out was very intuitive. So I learned all of it pretty quickly.
Nice. Yeah. And then file format wise, sounded like your camera fully supported out of the box. Did you shoot in RAW, or was that just easy peasy kind of working with the video formats you shoot in?
Yes, I shoot in 4K ProRes RAW, which I mentioned earlier that I used to work with the 2016 MacBook. So whenever I would import into that, and I tried to press play, nothing would happen. Like it would completely freeze and freak out. So then I had to like make proxies and wait for all of that to process, and it would be like hours of time just like processing. So something that really impressed me about the M2 MacBook was that it's not perfect. It's still a little bit stuttery, but you are able to like play it if you need to, without the necessary like creation of like too many proxies.
Right.
So going into the iPad, that was like one of the first questions I had for them was like, so how is this going to handle like really massive file sizes and like 4K, like ProRes, RAW, like how do you make proxies and stuff like that. But getting my hands on the iPad, it plays so smoothly that it like doesn't feel real. And I still don't understand how they did that, but it was like very, very impressive how smoothly like it could go. Yeah.
My initial time editing was in 2011. I had like the MacBook Air back then, and it could do it, but yeah, the proxies were critical to that back then, and it's amazing what an iPad can do today. Yeah. When you finish a project and kind of export it, do you know there are presets for the different social networks? Are you able to add your own kind of like tweaks to presets? So if there's like a TikTok preset, can you like modify a bit to like adjust the resolution or whatever it is that you'd like to export as?
I don't actually recall. I think like for my own editing, I don't really use presets necessarily.
Yeah.
It's just like whenever I start a new file, I immediately like choose like vertical, horizontal, 4K, et cetera, and then that's just what I stick with. So for the iPad, I would assume that it's something similar to that.
From what you've seen so far, is an iPad in your future in the next year or so? Is that something you'd consider adding to your lineup for when you're traveling, or want to try the pencil stuff more for the drawing on a frame and whatnot?
Honestly, I want to say yes because of the fact that I am graduating this year. So after next year, I anticipate a lot more like traveling and being on the go, as well as kind of like branching out my content from just tabletop stuff to like longer form, say like vlogs and stuff like that, where having an iPad would be very helpful. So it's definitely an investment that I'm looking at.
Awesome. Yeah. And it'd be a screen you can use as a backdrop if need be as well.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, anything we haven't covered about Final Cut Pro on iPad that you'd like to before we wrap it up?
No, I think that was a pretty comprehensive discussion.
Awesome. Yeah. I tried to kind of look at what's there. And
yeah.
I think we covered our bases here. And yeah, thank you so much for your time today. It's been great kind of learning, how you got your start, and not that so long ago. And it's just super impressive watching kind of the final output today. And where can people kind of find your videos?
Yeah, so my handles on all platforms are at Ash Has a Camera on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. That's mostly where I live.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ash. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Well, that's my interview with Ash. You can find Ash's website at ashhasacamera.me. Just search for Ash Has a Camera, and you'll find her incredible TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram channels. My thanks again for Ash for taking time out of her schedule to record. And my thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. You can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros or by subscribing in Apple Podcasts. The next episode dropping will be all about Apple's WWDC announcements, as we are getting real close to that happening, and I can't wait to see what we have coming this year to iPad OS. And with that, I'll talk to everyone again real soon for a fun-filled WWDC discussion.